Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a really fascinating plunge into how virtual reality is evolving.
Yeah, we're looking beyond the VR maybe you first heard about into something newer, something people are starting to call VR 2.0.
Exactly. And we've got some interesting material to dig into for this. There's an academic chapter looking at knowledge building in these user-generated VR worlds.
Right, and an article from Computer Graphics World called Virtual Reality 2.0, which is pretty direct.
Yeah. Plus, a YouTube video, bit of a provocative title, VR sucks, but VR 2.0 changes everything. And then some other pieces from IGI Global and Quantum News covering various angles.
So the plan for this deep dive, really, is to unpack what makes VR 2.0 different. What are the key advancements?
And what can it actually do? The potential applications, but also, let's be realistic, the challenges too.
Absolutely. We want to get a handle on what this shift means for you, how you might learn, collaborate, or just experience digital stuff in a much more immersive way.
Okay, so maybe let's start at the beginning. Can you sketch out what we mean by traditional VR, just to set the stage?
Yeah.
And what are the signs that we're moving into this VR 2.0 phase?
Sure. So traditional VR, think of the initial idea. It's an artificial, computer-generated world. The goal was to let users perceive digital data as reality, interact with it, get immediate feedback.
Right, the classic image is someone wearing a big headset, maybe gloves.
Exactly. You had head-mounted displays, the goggles, basically data gloves for tracking hands, sometimes even whole immersive rooms, concavities, early flight sims, driving sims. Those are good examples.
Yeah, I remember seeing those setups. They always looked, well, kind of clunky and expensive.
They were, and that points to the limitations. Traditional VR often suffered from really high costs. Gear was cumbersome, often tethered to beefy computers.
And computers back then weren't always up to the task, right?
Precisely. Plus, you had issues like simulator sickness for some people and latency, that noticeable delay, which could really break the feeling of being there.
Okay, so that's the baseline. What's the fundamental shift with VR 2.0? You said it's not just about better pictures.
No, not at all. The big idea, the real core of VR 2.0, is combining that online VR world with Web 2.0 ideas.
Web 2.0, so social media, user content, that sort of thing.
Exactly that. It puts a huge emphasis on users communicating, interacting with each other, and this is key users creating the content within these virtual spaces. The web itself becomes, potentially, the platform for VR.
Okay, so less about passively consuming a pre-built experience and more about actively participating, maybe even building the world.
You got it. The hallmarks of VR 2.0 are things like users having avatars to interact, everyone sharing the perception of the same virtual space, and being able to generate content, often in real time.
Like Second Life, was that sort of an early glimpse of this?
Absolutely. Second Life is often cited as a prototype. People created avatars, built things, socialized. It had many of those elements. And of course, none of this online VR stuff really takes off without fast internet and, decent network-based apps becoming common.
That makes sense. Now, two words you always hear with VR are presence and immersion. How do those ideas fit into VR 2.0? Do they change?
They're still absolutely central. Presence is that feeling, that gut sense of actually being in the virtual place, not your physical room. It's the being there sensation.
Okay, so what makes that feeling stronger?
Well, researchers like Stoyer talked about two big things. Vividness, how rich and detailed the sensory input is, sight, sound, maybe touch.
The quality of the simulation, basically.
Right. And interactivity, how quickly and how much you can affect the virtual world. Can you pick things up, change things? Does it respond instantly?
Makes sense. More responsive, more believable.
Yeah, and Sheridan added other factors too, like how much sensory info you get, how much control you have over your viewpoint or virtual hands. Can you modify the environment, how tough the task is, even how much is automated?
So the more the virtual world responds like the real world, the more present you feel.
Pretty much. Now, immersion is slightly different, though related. It's more that feeling of being completely absorbed, enveloped by the virtual world, like losing track of the real world.
Like getting lost in a good book, but way more intense.
Kind of, yeah. Technology helps, obviously. But immersion also connects to your emotions, your motivation. Are you really focused, what psychologists sometimes call flow?
Okay.
And here's what's interesting about VR 2.0. Achieving strong presence and immersion isn't just about having the fanciest, most expensive tech anymore.
How so?
Because the social interaction, the user-generated content, the feeling of being with others in that space, those things can create incredibly powerful feelings of presence and immersion, sometimes even with simpler tech.
Huh. That's really interesting. So the social and creative aspects are just as important as the graphics, maybe.
They can be, absolutely. And that leads directly into how VR 2.0 can be used for learning and what the academic chapter calls knowledge building.
Knowledge building. So not just downloading facts, but actually creating understanding.
Exactly. It's seen as a social process, something a community does together when, what they already know isn't quite enough to solve a problem or grasp something new.
Okay, so how does VR 2.0 help with that? What does it offer?
Several things. First, visualization. Seeing complex ideas or places in realistic 3D can just make them click in a way 2D diagrams or text can't. The chapter mentioned, like, a virtual trip to a volcano.
Yeah, much more memorable than a picture.
Definitely. Second is interaction with virtual objects. You can pick things up, take them apart, see how they work, scale them up, overlay information.
Like a virtual lab bench or workshop.
Precisely. Imagine engineering students dissecting a virtual engine, or biology students exploring a cell by actually, going inside it virtually. It encourages discovery learning.
Active learning, not just passive.
Right. Then there's the social side, again, personal and social presence. Using avatars makes you feel like you're really there with other people.
So it feels more like a real classroom or study group.
It can, yeah. It fosters that sense of community, shared responsibility for learning. The example given was police officers from different places training together in a shared VR simulation. They have to cooperate effectively.
I can see how that shared space would be powerful for collaboration.
It is. And that ties into environmental presence, everyone being in the same virtual place. It makes communication clearer. If I point and say, look at that virtual model, everyone sees the same thing.
Ah, yeah. Less ambiguity than trying to describe something in the text chat.
Exactly. It gets closer to face-to-face interaction. Think about learning intercultural skills doing it inside a virtual traditional Chinese house, like the example, adds crucial context. Situated learning.
Learning in context, right? Makes total sense.
And finally, VR 2.0 empowers users to create. When learners build their own 3D models or simulations to explain something, or design something like an earthquake-resistant building and test it virtually.
They have to understand it much more deeply to build it.
Absolutely. It's learning by design, learning by doing. You test your ideas immediately. Plus, just the act of creating and explaining it to others, the self-explanation effect, really cements the knowledge.
So VR 2.0 is like a toolkit for building understanding together.
That's a great way to put it. And another powerful aspect is how it can pull in other tools and content into the virtual world.
What do you mean, like websites?
Yeah, web browsers, videos, audio files, live data like RSS feeds. Imagine accessing all that without taking the headset off. It creates a central hub.
Wow. Okay, give me an example.
The chapter mentioned a Shakespeare course happening inside a virtual Globe theater. You could be there looking around the theater, but also pull up the e-text of the play, watch a video lecture, maybe even ask an AI chatbot questions about the text, all within that environment.
That sounds incredibly seamless.
It could be. And people are working on integrating VR with traditional learning management systems, LMSs. There was a project called Slittle linking Second Life with Moodle.
So tying the virtual campus into the regular course structure.
Right. Setting up virtual lecture halls, labs, libraries, organizing the whole learning process within VR. The trend is towards blending learning and life more seamlessly, supporting lifelong learning.
The virtual world becomes part of the learning ecosystem.
Exactly. And looking ahead, we expect hardware to keep improving flatter screens, high resolution, better touch controls, maybe better haptic gloves.
But you mentioned challenges earlier.
Yeah, a big one is compatibility. Right now, different VR 2.0 systems often don't talk to each other. We really need more standardization so your stuff isn't locked into one platform.
Yeah, an open ecosystem would be much better. Okay, now that YouTube video you mentioned, the one with the dramatic title, it focused a lot on the tech driving VR 2.0, right? What were the highlights there?
It really dug into the processing power improvements, like the Qualcomm Snapdragon XR2 Gen 2 chip in the Quest 3, a big jump in graphics power, around 2.4 teraflops, they said.
Which is pretty good for a standalone headset.
Yeah, and they talked about the next step, the XR2 plus Gen 2, possibly in Samsung's next headset, aiming for better sustained performance, meaning less overheating and supporting maybe 4K per eye displays at 120 Hz. And then there's the XR2 Gen 3 on the horizon, promising another leap.
So the chips are getting way more powerful, closing the gap with PCs or consoles.
Getting closer. And interestingly, the video mentioned alternative chips too, like AMD's Ryzen Z1 Extreme. That thing has way more graphics power, like 8.6 teraflops, closer to a console. There were rumors Meta might use something like that in a future high-end headset.
Wow, okay. That kind of power could enable amazing visuals without needing a PC.
Potentially, yeah. But the video stressed that just having power isn't enough. Managing the heat, the thermal design, is critical so the headset can actually use that power for more than a few minutes.
Right, nobody wants a hot brick strapped to their face. Sustained performance is key.
Totally. And on displays, the push is for higher resolution, ideally 4K per eye, to kill that screen door effect, and faster refresh rates, 120 Hz or more, for smoothness.
What about the field of view? That's often a complaint.
Yeah, the video mentioned that as a current challenge, along with battery life and resolution. One tech they highlighted for wider field of view, maybe over 140 degrees, while also making headsets slimmer, is hologramic pancake lenses.
Holographic pancake lenses.
Mm.
Sounds fancy. But a wider view would definitely boost immersion, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Seeing more of the virtual world, less like looking through goggles.
Okay, so faster chips, better screens, wider view. What else are the VR 2.0 articles highlighting in terms of enhancing the experience?
Well, beyond raw power, there's a big focus on feeling. Haptic feedback is a huge one, making you feel touch. That could be simple controller rumbles or sophisticated gloves letting you feel textures.
Killing virtual objects.
Yeah,
That would be a game changer.
definitely. Also, eye tracking and facial recognition. Eye tracking lets you interact just by looking, which is very intuitive. Facial recognition maps your expressions onto your avatar, making social interactions feel much more, well, human.
So my avatar could actually smile when I smile.
Exactly. And getting rid of wires, fully wireless, lightweight headsets are crucial for comfort and freedom, makes it much less cumbersome.
Yeah, untethered is the way to go.
For sure. AI is playing a bigger role too. Smarter virtual environments, AI characters, NPCs that react believably, making worlds feel more alive.
Less predictable, more dynamic.
Right. And better cross-platform support, using web technologies so VR experiences can run more easily on different devices. Plus, graphics keep getting better, real-time ray tracing for super realistic lighting, stuff like that.
So it's a combination of better visuals, better interaction, more freedom.
And more feeling. Think about wearable tech beyond headsets too, haptic gloves we mentioned, maybe even full-body suits eventually. And underpinning a lot of this is faster networks like 5G and cloud computing.
How does the cloud help?
It means complex calculations or high-end graphics rendering can happen on powerful servers, and the result is streamed to your headset. So you don't necessarily need the most expensive device yourself to get a high-quality experience.
Ah, like cloud gaming, but for VR application.
Pretty much. And then there's the whole blockchain and NFT angle, the idea of owning digital assets, virtual land, creating real economies within these VR spaces.
Okay, that's a whole other rabbit hole. But it paints a picture of a much richer, more interactive, more tangible virtual experience. And you said it's moving beyond gaming. Where are we seeing the biggest impacts?
Healthcare is a big one. Hyper-realistic surgical training simulations, VR therapy for things like phobias, PTSD, pain management using controlled virtual environments.
Safer training, new therapy tools. Makes sense.
Education, too. We talked about virtual field trips, exploring complex concepts in 3D. Web-based VR could make quality education accessible globally.
Breaking down barriers? What about work?
Huge potential for collaboration. Imagine remote teams meeting in a shared virtual space with lifelike avatars, feeling like you're actually in the room together, working on shared virtual whiteboards or models.
The virtual office, but maybe finally done right.
Possibly. Retail's exploring it too. Virtual showrooms, trying on clothes virtually, seeing how furniture looks in your actual room via mixed reality maybe.
Trying before buying, virtually.
Exactly. Real estate and architecture are using it heavily for virtual walkthroughs, making design changes in real time with clients inside the virtual model.
Very cool. Any other areas?
Wellness-guided meditation in serene VR locations, gamified fitness apps that make exercise fun, and as the articles noted, specialized training for military, industry, sports, design for products, cities, buildings, therapy, journalism, anthropology, art, science. The list is pretty long.
It really seems like it could touch almost everything. But okay, let's bring it back down to earth. What are the hurdles? What challenges still need tackling for VR 2.0 to really take off?
Cost is still a factor, especially for the high-end gear. Getting the price down for really good experiences is key for mass adoption.
Hardware limitations are still there too.
Yeah, things like visual comfort over long periods, getting resolutions that truly match human eyesight, wider field of view without distortion, better battery life. These are ongoing engineering challenges.
And content. You need stuff to do in VR.
Absolutely crucial. We need a steady stream of high-quality, diverse content, not just games, but all these other applications we talked about. Content creation needs to keep pace with the hardware.
Okay, what else?
Privacy and security are big ones. As these devices potentially track eye movements, facial expressions, maybe even more biometric data, where does that data go? How is it used? How is it protected? These are really important ethical questions.
Definitely things we need to figure out.
Yeah.
So, looking ahead, what are the big future trends? Where's this all heading?
We'll likely see more blurring of the lines between VR, augmented reality, AR, and mixed reality, MR. Think glasses that can overlay digital info onto the real world, but also switch to full VR.
The metaverse concept, basically. Seamless switching.
Sort of, yeah. And making VR more mobile, less tied to specific rooms, using it on the go. Thinking of VR not just as a place, but as a tool, a new way to explain complex things.
A new language for communication.
Could be. Also, improving how we navigate virtual spaces, better wayfinding, redirected walking techniques that let you walk naturally in a small physical space but cover large distances virtually.
Tricking the brain a bit.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And new business models will emerge, subscriptions, virtual goods, cloud VR services, specialized tools for education, training, entertainment.
And the user experience itself. Will it keep getting better?
That's the goal. More realism, more intuitive controls, better storytelling, personalization, using AI, really trying to evoke emotion and empathy.
What about the social side? You mentioned communities.
Yeah, that's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
VR could foster amazing online communities, a real sense of belonging, but there are also valid concerns about potential isolation from the physical world. Finding that balance is key.
And the therapeutic side seems really promising too.
Very much so. Using VR exposure therapy for anxiety, PTSD. It seems to work by leveraging the brain's neuroplasticity, its ability to change, engaging brain areas involved in emotion and memory.
So VR can literally help rewire the brain for therapeutic benefit.
The research suggests it can, yeah. Same goes for training. Immersive simulations can create stronger learning pathways. And storytelling in VR, it can be incredibly engaging, especially with AI tailoring the narrative.
It really is kind of mind-blowing when you think about the potential depth of these experiences and their impact on us.
It really is. So wrapping it up, VR 2.0 is this major leap forward, right? Better realism and much more user involvement, way broader applications beyond just games.
And the tech keeps getting better, pushing immersion and usability.
Right.
It really feels like it could change how we learn, work, connect.
Absolutely. But we still have those hurdles: cost, tech limits, getting enough great content, sorting out privacy. Those need solving for it to become truly mainstream.
Definitely. It's an exciting time, but with challenges.
So here's maybe a final thought to leave you with. As VR 2.0 gets better and better and the lines between the physical and virtual keep blurring, how does that change our fundamental understanding of, well, reality itself? And how will it reshape learning and social connection? What new possibilities does it open up? And maybe just as importantly, what new responsibilities come along with creating and inhabiting these increasingly powerful virtual worlds? Something to think about.